Hello and welcome to today's press conference on impact of natural disasters on children. Natural disasters and extreme weather events present a significant and growing threat to the well-being of children, affecting about 175 million children globally every year. Cyclones, floods, earthquakes, droughts, pandemics. India is faced with some calamity or the other routinely. Children from vulnerable backgrounds are the most impacted, often with long-lasting effects including disease, injury, hunger, psychological harm, and even abandonment or death. To address us on this critical issue disrupting the well-being of children, disaster preparedness, and response with respect to children, and promoting their resilience to face such calamities, we have with us today Mr. Sumanta Kar, Senior Deputy National Director, SOS Children's Villages of India, and Mr. Anil Kumar Sinha, retired IS officer and Senior Advisor, Mentor and Consultant, Hazardous Risk Management, Climate Change, Adaptation, and Sustainable Development. Dear members of the media, we're all set for a very interesting discussion ahead. You can type any questions that strike you during this session by using the button at the bottom of your screen. These questions will be taken up by our panelists at the end of the session. Mr. Kar, sir, I would now request you to kindly address the media, please.
Everybody, and a small presentation. I'll run it through, and then of course we'll be open to the question and answer sessions. And as you know, around the world, the frequency and the severity of emergencies are rising dramatically, and increasingly emergency result from a combinations of causes. It could be due to global economic crisis, climate changes, and of course, due to natural calamities. And during these disasters, it is the children who are the most vulnerable, they get affected, and also the livelihoods of the families also got impacted. If you look at worldwide, there are around roughly 400 million children, those who live in extreme poverty, and there are around 220 million children, those who are at risk of growing up alone, and they are at the risk of losing their parental care, and 140 million children have lost either of the parents or both the parents. And any kind of disaster as a kind of very negatively, it impacts these children the most among all the vulnerable children. In India, if you look at, there are 20 million children, they are at the risk of losing parental care or have lost parental care. And the statistics are really very alarming. Almost 6 lakhs children are into the flesh trades. You can see the children, they are either in the victim of trafficking, they are into the child labors, the children, they are deprived of going to the schools. Many of the children are malnourished. They are the children, they are addicted to the drugs. So this is the kind of scenario where the children are at the risk of losing their parental care. And you can look at the recent disasters, India being the 14th most disaster-prone country because of its socio-economic condition and geoclimatic conditions. And in 40% of India's population are children. And you can imagine that how vulnerable we are as and when any disaster hit the country. And in the recent past, we have seen many disasters has happened in India, whether is it the earthquake in Latur in recent past, or maybe you can talk about the earthquake in Bhuj, cyclone, and also the recent Amphan, Fani. So as and when every year in India, we witness one form of other disaster, and The recent one is the pandemic COVID, which has posed a serious kind of threat to our vulnerable community, particularly the children. And it really impacts when any disaster, or the first thing they is effect on their physical health. Then not only they get injured, or not only they are also affected due to not proper food. The basic care gets affected, whether it is the food, the shelter, nutrition, and more importantly, the safety of the children and security of the children got affected. Other than the physical part, even their mental health. Many of the children during the disasters, there is always a kind of what you call, they undergo a kind of trauma, and because of the thought and feeling got disconnected, and because they see a lot of destructions around, they see a lot of their own people, relatives are getting affected, even lost their people, also getting the things which they like most, and that also get destroyed. And more importantly, their own routine life get impacted, and not being able to be with the parents or not be following the daily routine has its impact on their mental or emotional well-being. And if you look at also in a little bit of long-term impact, because when there is a natural disasters of its high magnitude, also the infrastructure gets affected. The schools there is no regularity in the continuation of the educations, and the families got impacted. The income of the families get impacted. The basic rights of the children are also get impacted. And this is a kind of long-term impact on the children or any kind of disasters. And wow, we in the SOS Children's Village, if you look at the recent past, as I said, whether it is the earthquake in Bhuj and Latur, tsunami, and also the recent past in 19 and 20, particularly the Ampan, Nisagra, Nivar, and particularly now the COVID, it has really impacted the children the most. And not only the children, also the children from the vulnerable families also got impacted. We as an organization, our first and as a SOS Children's Village, our firm belief is that the children, as far as possible, during the time of emergency, how fast they can be provided a caring family environment, and particularly those who are on accompanied children, how they can provide an environment where they feel secured, they feel protected, and also support the families and community to prepare and respond to such emergency. And particularly at the time of emergency, what is critical is how fast and how quick we reach out to the children or the community and support them and help them to overcome it. And we as an organization or any individuals in whatever capacity, together with the partners, with the agencies, with authority, with a single-minded approach, work is a cohesive manner with an ultimate objective to help and to settle them back to their normal life. If you look at the disaster mitigations, and that is very, very critical, how do we prepare our community to so that there is it can be mitigated, reduced, lessened. So preparedness is very, very critical. And for that, for any different types of natural calamities, disasters, or hazards, how do we prepare our people, our children, and the community is very, very critical. And after the disaster, how quickly we bring them back to the normal life, that is what we aim should be. If you look at COVID, I think the World Bank says this because of this COVID pandemic, almost 115 million people worldwide now has moved to the abject poverty. And because of the poverty, which is going to increase to 150 million, and India being the second populous country, here also the children in the abject poverty, the population will also move to those abject poverty. And that may lead to the abandonment of children. And that's what is very, very critical at this juncture, how is the COVID has really impacted. And at the time of COVID, the most impacted is the emotional well-being of the children, and particularly the children because of their the social distancing, and they are restricted largely to remain at on their own home and no contact with their friends, and no opportunity even to play, and the self-contentment has really impacted their emotional well-being. And second most important aspect of that is because of the education. Even if you look at in India also, there is always a divide and have and have nots. And today's this digital device, which is basically because of these online classes, and many of our children and in the community are not able to attend those online classes, and it also has impacted the education of the children, and we feel, and there is a kind of danger we see that they may not be leave, the school dropout rates may not increase, and also there may be lead to the moving to the child level. So how quickly and sooner we as an society we ensure that children are supported in their education, and not only when the schools also open up, how do we help them so that we give them time and space to adjust in the school environment, and that is where all the parents, caregivers, they play a very, very critical role. During this COVID time, not only the children, even the caregivers, those who are from different children's home, and they also got affected. Many of them have lost their jobs, or partially they have a kind of pay cuts. So they are also struggling. So it is not only the children who are lost parental care or the children who are at the risk, even the caregivers, they also got affected during this COVID. As an organization, SOS Children's Village, we have two main programs. One we call Family Like Care, another is Family Strengthening Program. In Family Like Care, we provide a family close to a normal family to a child who has lost parental care. And through our Family Strengthening Program, we support the families who are at the risk of, where the children are at the risk of losing parental care. And while through this supporting program, we ensure that the child continue to be stay with their parents and get their basic rights in terms of their education, health, and nutrition. At the same time, we also help the families to build their income level through various income generating activities. And this during this COVID pandemic, we not only building the awareness among our own SOS families, in our children, in our SOS family, also the children in the community. We not only building their awareness on particularly how to maintaining social distancing and ensuring the hygienic practices, but how quickly we bring their normal life through digital learning, and also working on their emotional well-being. Also supported the families to show that the regular food and the nutritional aspect is taken care. Working with the families, particularly for their livelihood, was also one of the critical components which SOS has been doing and continue to do that. Roughly 30,000 children we are supporting under this program, and 2,500 children, new additional children we have enrolled in the program, which got impacted due to the COVID. We have kind of set up a kind of quarantine setup centers where the children, before they are placed to any children's home, they can have a safe place during those periods, and before and after that they can be placed into a kind of children's home. We intend to reach out to 8,000 new children in 2021, and around more than 8,000 families we are supporting through our family strengthening program, and particular component is on the livelihood, how quickly we support the family so that those who have lost the livelihood, they can start they can continue to do the same livelihood, or through a skilling they can move to a kind of alternative livelihood programs. This is we are working in 32 locations and around in 22 states. And this is, and I can say at the end that during this COVID, it is not only the children, and it is also the people in the community, those who got affected. And it is essential that how quickly we ensure not only their mental and emotional well-being, how quickly we ensure their continuation of education and bringing their normal life back. And it is the responsibility of the whole society, civil society, and both private and non-private organization, government together work and to address, because the problem is so enormous. It is only as together we can reach out and support them. In SOS Children's Village, not only we do work with the children, those who have lost parental care and family strengthening program, with different basket of services we provide, a short stay home where the child also will be supported through our kinship program. And last 1 year, more than 15,000 children we have supported through our emergency program. During this emergency, the safety of the children is very, very critical, and to make sure that through various child safeguarding mechanism, the children are safe and secure, and that is very, very critical aspect which really impact the children and at the time of disaster. So that's a brief presentation from my side, and now over to Mr. Anil.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kar. And now I would like to hand over to Mr. Sinha. Mr. Sinha, could you please also take us through your presentation?
Okay, thank you, Natasha, and thank you, Samantha, for this opportunity. I'm very happy that SOS Children Villages has organized this media briefing. And good morning and namaste to all our media friends. I suppose about a dozen of them or more than a dozen are there, you see. But it's very important for us to keep interacting with media and keep updating them, because they have a tremendous responsibility and role in this society, you see. So I'm very happy and I really feel privileged. Now, talking of disasters, I think it will be best to, start with some brief discussion about the ongoing pandemic, you see, global pandemic, COVID-19. WHO calls it COVID-19, but about the terminology, I'd like to clarify right in the beginning, my understanding. I think COVID-19 is a bit misleading, this digit 19, because you see, this pandemic is an unprecedented in human history, practically, not just a century or so, but literally unprecedented. It has never happened, this kind of a thing, and I hope this kind of thing does not really repeat. And the kind of impact which it has had all around 360-degree, whether it is individual life or the community life, national life, or the whole world. So its impact is going to be very profound. We are still experiencing, going through it. And in terms of time span, I suppose we may be talking of this pandemic even after the 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, or even 100 years, like we talk of World War I or II. And there are lessons, to be taken from that. From that perspective, I think this COVID is going to have a very long time span, of discussion. Now, if we look at it from that point of view, and you say COVID-19, the first thing which comes to my mind is, was there a COVID-18? Was there a COVID-17? No, definitely it wasn't there, you see. But then 18, 19, they are like serial numbers. And that is why my understanding, which I have also conveyed to WHO, and I like to convey first of all to our media friends, is that it should be designated as COVID 2019, you see. Because even 100 years later, 50 years later, 2019, no one will ever confuse as a serial number. But 19 is like, whether it was 18 or 17 or there'll be another one, etc., etc. That is one point of view about the terminology. The second, which I have not been able to understand where it originated, very strange, but we have been talking officially, WHO has been talking of social distancing. I think what we are really required is to observe physical distancing. Social distancing, not only in India, world over, say in US and many countries, has got a different connotation. You see, so let us not get into that. And I think we need to correct it before it is too late. So therefore, I advocate and make a plea and appeal to everyone to kindly think over it and adopt the nomenclature, this COVID 2019 and physical distancing, I think, which is what Sumanta Kar also mentioned. Now, having said this, you see, I think, as I said, this pandemic has been of such huge proportion, you see. The way, the fast rate at which it engulfed the whole world has been intimidating, you see, to say the least. To most of the countries, the most strong of the economies across the world, you see, and it has posed serious threat to world public health security, you see. That is one immediate. Secondly, it has really damaged the global economic growth, you see, and so in India also. And let us hope that, the whole world order and our country, our fundamentals, I hope are good enough, to tide over this. Otherwise, this is going to have tremendous effect on the livelihood, on employment, on growth, and that means everything, a lot of industries, etc., etc., all that. The next is the impact on the environment, then socio-cultural challenges, the kind of socio-cultural challenges. And one of the major challenges which is being faced is what Mr. Samantha talked, about the impact on children and families. Women was not mentioned as such, but I think women also have been affected to a great extent. Then governance is the next thing which has come to under severe challenge, you see. Starting with public health infrastructure, governance relating to that, whole health infrastructure all across the world, you see. There is just no country which can claim that it has had a public health infrastructure which was prepared to take on a pandemic like this, you see. Neither the US on that side or Japan on this side or India or any other one, you see. So in terms of governance, issues of coordination, we have seen it in India, a lot has been practiced, perhaps a lot more is required. Risk communication is very, very important. When there's a risk like this, how do we communicate it to the whole population and to different segments of the population? Because while apparently it may look that pandemic has affected everyone, but obviously it affects those who are more vulnerable, who are marginalized, and who are weak, much more. The impact on that segment is far more, and that is what Samantha talked about, impact on the children. Therefore, this communication has to be targeted, has to be differentiated, and it's a very important part of the whole strategy and the plan. And then community engagement. There are many factors, but I'm only mentioning a few of them. Community engagement, as we have seen. Again, community, one has to understand, you see, in all its shades and colors, you see, how community has engaged in the management in response to the pandemic, you see. Right from our frontline workers, whether it is the medical, health-related staff, doctors, paramedics, and all that, or it is the police, or it is the sanitation workers, or it is the other essential people, like power supply, etc., other infrastructure. Or even one thing which has been remarkable in our country is that none of the daily consumer supplies anywhere in the country was disrupted, you see. There was no major disruption. There may have been some minor disruption for a day or two, etc. But I think on that count, therefore, it is all community, and different parts of the community play different roles, you see. So it's very, very important to understand that and look at how to engage the community. I mean, while the governance overall, there are people who will have views on both the sides, but I would say has been very, very well and robust with my 30, 40 years of experience in public service, you see. But then there are many challenges. There's just no doubt. And then climate change is the next thing, which has also led to a whole lot of, you see. Now, in the past 10 years, 83% of all disasters triggered by natural hazards were caused by extreme weather events, extreme precipitation, extreme heat, extreme cold, etc., things like that, and climate change, you see. I'll give some examples also. And since 1990s, you see, in the last 30 years or so, you see, there's been 35% increase as far as the overall disaster scenario is concerned, 35% increase due to climate change related factors, you see. Now, you see, let me briefly mention, I will not go into details about children because Samantha has done it very well. I think the organization is doing a tremendous job all over India, and so many children, etc. But children really suffer tremendous trauma, you see. When I look at children in my family, my grandchildren, or children in the neighborhood, then I'm really anguished. I'm very, very concerned, because they have been deprived of their basic freedom, you see. Basic freedom to run around, basic freedom to jump, basic freedom to, interact with their own peers, their own classmates, etc. And that has been very unfortunate. I'm not too sure what is the kind of mental trauma, psychological trauma, which children are going. I have not yet come, which children are undergoing. I have not yet come across any study which tries to analyze that and quantify that, you see. But I think that's a very sad part of the whole story. Perhaps it will take time for us, to see the manifestations of that and see the changes in the personalities and the characters and things like that. As Samantha mentioned, you see, they have been deprived of their schools, their teaching, their interaction, their peer learning, peer interaction, all those things which are very important ingredients of personality development of children, you see. Now, talking of, you see, Bhuj earthquake, this was mentioned by Samantha. I think around 1,200 schools, as Joint Secretary in charge of disaster management, on 26 January 2001, when Bhuj earthquake took place, within 12 hours, in the morning, 8:45, the earthquake had taken place. In the night, 8:30, I, along with a team of doctors from AIMS and Safdarjung, I was sitting with the collector of Bhuj, you see, who was sitting under a tree because his collectorate building, just outside collectorate building, he was sitting under a tree because the building had been damaged severely, you see, and he could not function from there, you see. And I think around 1179 also children were killed, and they were killed by their own school buildings falling on them, the walls of the school buildings falling on them. Let me take just one more example. Kashmir earthquake, which took place on 8th of October 2005, you see, more than 270,000 children were killed, people were killed, more on the Pakistan side, less on India side, but the number of children who were killed was close to 80,000. I mean, that can be the kind of impact, you see, which is so very unfortunate, in disaster situation. And that is why it is very important to address this issue, you see, and which has been done very well by Sumanta. You see, now let me come to the Indian scenario more particularly. Samantha mentioned that we are 14th most disaster prone. Given that kind of a scenario, you see, India had set up, our government had set up a high powered committee with the approval of then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji in 99, you see, which is like a Bible, which forms the foundation of major reforms which have taken place in the country in the last 20 years. And I know it personally because I'm a member secretary of that high-powered committee. So I was drowned in that, you see. So that led to the Parliament passing Disaster Management Act in 2005, first such act. There have been acts on related subjects, industrial disasters, industrial safety, pollution, petroleum products, and etc. But this was the first law to come up in the country to define disaster for the first time. There was no definition of disaster before the Disaster Management Act 2005, you see. So it defines disaster for the first time, and then it lays down many things, important things. I just mentioned one or two. One is three-tier structure in the country. It's starting with National Disaster Management Authority, which is chaired by the Prime Minister. Then at the state level, the state disaster management authorities in every state by law, which are chaired by the respective chief ministers. And then at the district level, district disaster management authorities, which are chaired by the district magistrates and co-chaired by the chairman or chairperson of the Jilla Parishads. So this was the institutional infrastructure throughout the country, three-tier kind of a thing. And then it laid emphasis on preparation of district disaster management plan based on a scientific process of hazard, vulnerability, risk analysis, you see. So when we talk of vulnerability, there we talk of children or other segments who are more vulnerable. We talk of women, we talk of differently abled people, etc. So therefore, it's a very scientific way of preparing district disaster management plans. Now, under the law, every district is mandated to prepare multi-hazard district disaster management plans, you see. Then India passed a disaster management policy, adopted a disaster management policy in 2009, you see. Then Prime Minister came with a 10-point agenda, Modi ji, I think in 2016 or something like that, which covers a whole lot of, which gives a kind of a roadmap as to how to proceed involving educational institutions, etc. The law also laid down financial allocations, disaster response fund, disaster mitigation fund, and now the 15th Finance Commission, headed by Mr. N.K. Singh, they have come out with much more clear dispensations. Specific funds have been defined for the first time for disaster prevention, disaster mitigation, disaster preparedness, and capacity building, I think, which has been a landmark step taken by the 15th Finance Commission, you see. Then capacity building, I mentioned, institutional level, individual level, community level, a whole lot of work has been going on. Then one very important thing in the context of disasters is the early warning system, you see. How early we can pick up the warnings and how well we can communicate to all the population, especially the vulnerable populations, you see. So after the 2004 tsunami, which affected around 20 countries around the ocean, you see, India was also affected, and we took major steps, and now we have much better systems. One is that India Meteorological Department, IMD, its system has gone several notches upwards, you see. Now their predictions and their weather forecasts match and sometimes even are better than what is being done by European countries or even USA, you see. And then we have Doppler radars, we have in the seas, bios are there. There is a whole system called INQUIS, you see, which has been put up. So technologically, there has been tremendous advancement along with the space technology, but the challenges remain. Challenges remain. On the tech end, we have made a lot of improvements, but on the people's end, because the early warnings have to reach out to the people, reach out to the villages and the families and the women, you see. And women, if they are working in kitchen, this was something which a woman asked me in a conference, sir, if your early warning doesn't reach me in my kitchen where I'm doing my work, you see, then it has fallen short, you see. So I admitted, I said, yes. So that is, and then Let me come to the scenario in the third point. In the last 8 to 10 months, you see, we have seen a very vicious scenario of concurrent disasters, overlapping disasters, compound disasters, complex disasters, you see. Floods have taken place in the background of the COVID. Earthquakes have taken place, cyclones have taken place, chemical disasters have taken place. In Vizag, LG Polymer, a South Korean company of 20 years vintage, they had gas leak and 12 people died, you see. And several incidents have taken place in Vizag itself and many other countries and all across the world also, you see. So that has been a very, very complex scenario of concurrent disasters happening, which have, divergent kind of requirements. You see, COVID says that do not go out, cover yourself. But if earthquake happens, or if flood happens, or cyclone happens, you are supposed to leave your house and go to safer places. So there were very contradictory kind of demands, There are the huge dilemmas which the administration faces, governance dilemmas, etc. But these are the challenges, And in the last 8 to 10 months, over 100 natural disasters have been, due to climate change events, have taken place, and more than 50 million people, they have been affected. Now, talking of India's initiative, India has taken many initiatives. India has gone into major reforms in the sector of disaster management. That is not to say we have done everything. I mentioned some of them, but many others. But one which I like to mention, which is also mentioned by Samantha, is creating disaster resilient infrastructure. We have seen in Odisha, Phylline cyclone, Hudhud cyclone, other cyclone, that Odisha government commendably, they have done commendable work. They have evacuated million people, million and a half people to safer places in less than 60 hours. This kind of thing hasn't happened anywhere else in the world, you see. They have done tremendous work and they have reduced the loss of human lives to single digit practically or double digit, you see, compared to 10,000 when the 1970 cyclone or 99, the super cyclone took place on 29th of October, you see. So we have gone much ahead as a country with National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project in 13 states. You see, that has been done. But infrastructure losses have been going up. Because of the development, the cost has been going up and the losses have been going up. So India, along with 18 to 20 countries, has taken the initiative and set up a coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure. It is big, hosted by India. It is funded majorly by India and then supported by 18, 20 countries. Let me mention the last point and then end with that. I think there are time limitations and our media friends are always under time constraints. Is that, there are global frameworks at the global level. There are global frameworks to which India is a signatory and 200 countries are signatories. And they are very important because they inform and they form the basis of what we are doing and all other countries are doing. One is the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, which was adopted in 2015 in Japan, 2015 to 2030. Then we have sustainable development goals that also has a time frame of 2030. There are 17 goals relating to poverty, education, health, etc., etc. All these issues which are related to the vulnerability of the people. Then there's a Paris Agreement on climate change, again in 2015 with a time frame of 2030, and new urban agenda, which is about the urban, explosion which has been taking place all over the world. That also has the time frame of 2030. You see, so I think ultimately, let me end by saying that whatever development programs we are undertaking, our overall development process must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. You see, I think that is very, very important. And I'll end so that we leave no one behind. That is the slogan we follow. Leave no one behind, because disasters is everyone's business. We have to make it everyone's business. And let me mention just 1 minute that many states, Odisha, Gujarat, Nagaland, Kerala, including Bihar, they have taken tremendous initiative relating to school safety, which focus on children, you see. I'm not going to the details. If there are questions, I hope there will be a question on that. I'll be happy to answer. But let me end by just two slogans, which I think are very apt. One is about preparedness, and second is about long-term planning. One is विकास, वन इज आपदा नहीं हो भारी यदि पूरी हो तैयारी. अगर आपकी तैयारी पूरी है तो भारी नहीं पड़ेगी. द सेकेंड इज विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत से बचाए. आफत इज डिजास्टर. विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत से बचाए और विकास ऐसा हो जो आफत न बन जाए. हमारा भुज में विकास हुआ schools, लेकिन वो विकास अच्छा नहीं था because schools killed children. The district hospital killed doctors and paramedics and patients, you see. So let me end at this note and thank you very much once again for this opportunity. I'll be happy to take on questions. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha. That was indeed very informative.
मैं अनीता गड़गड़े, जब महाराष्ट्र में किल्लारी भाग में जब बहुत बड़ा भूकंप हुआ तब SOS के माध्यम से 9 गांव में आंगनवाड़ी स्टार्ट कर दी.